On the fourth voyage, which began May 9th, 1502, Columbus hoped to sail around the world. Ferdinand and Isabella evidently shared his hope, gave him a letter of introduction to Vasco da Gama, who was then starting out on his second journey to India. They had also sent out an officer by the name of Ovando, with 2,500 men, to be the new governor of Hispaniola. Humiliating as it was for Columbus to be replaced and lose the title of viceroy, he still had his share in the gold mines and was permitted to send an agent to Ovondo's fleet to look after his interest. And if he did sail around the world on this voyage, it would be the crowning glory of his life. The high voyage, he called it. Ferdinand, who was 14, was to go with his father. Among the 140 members of the crew, there were a number of other young boys, some only 12 years old, but all big and strong enough to sail around the world, if the way was found. And why shouldn't it be? Had not Marco Polo sailed home from China? Somewhere then there must be a strait through which he had sailed. Columbus believed that it must be along the western shore of the Caribbean Sea. By the end of June, his 4 caravels were in the Caribbean, skirting the southern shore of Puerto Rico. Just off the harbor of Santo Domingo, Columbus saw signs of a cyclone. Ovondo's fleet was then ready to leave on their return voyage to Spain. Columbus sent a messenger to him to suggest that his fleet delay sailing and to ask permission to anchor his 4 caravels in the harbor until the cyclone was over. Ovando refused. "Cyclone," he scoffed, and he sent out his 20 ships as planned. His only precaution was to put the admiral's agent, who was taking back 4,000 pesos of gold, on the worst ship in the fleet. The cyclone struck that night. As the 4 caravels tossed and twisted in the open sea, Columbus spent the awful hours cursing Ovando and praying to God. In the morning, when the sky cleared, Santo Domingo, built of wood and thatch, was flattened to the ground. Ovondo's fleet, caught by the wind at the end of the island, had been battered to pieces on the rock, all except one. The poorest one, carrying the admiral's agent in gold, had escaped. Since all 4 caravels also survived the storm, Columbus was accused by his enemies of having raised the cyclone with the help of the devil. Sailing west across the Caribbean, Columbus followed the shore of Honduras, looking for the strait. In 28 days of continual rain, thunder, and lightning. "Other tempests have I seen," he wrote, "but none that lasted so long. Many old hands we looked on as stout fellows lost their courage. What griped me most was the sufferings of my son. But our Lord lent him such courage that he even heartened the rest, and he worked as though he had been at sea all his life. My brother Bartholomew was in the worst of the ships, and I feel terrible having persuaded him to come against his will." The storm finally ended, and they followed the Nicaragua coast south, still searching for the strait. 10 days of October were spent in the Chiriqui Lagoon in Costa Rica. There, Indians told Columbus that 9 days' march to the west would bring him to the ocean. That was over land. A waterway was what Columbus was searching for. He was also searching for gold. This, the natives said, was to be found in Veragua. Gold was there, to be sure, but the natives of Veragua were hostile. At sight of the ships, 100 or more rushed to the ocean's edge, brandishing their spears to drive off the invaders. From there, Columbus sailed on along the rugged coast as far as Portobello, just beyond the present entrance to the Panama Canal. Here the ships were caught in a winter storm even worse than the one they had survived. Columbus wrote in his journals that his eyes never beheld seas so high and angry, never did sky look more terrible. The lightning broke forth with such violence that each time I wondered if it had carried off my spars and sails. One day there was an added terror, a water spout which drew up a column of water thicker than a barrel, twisting it about like a whirlwind. Fortunately, Ferdinand said, his father was able to dissolve it by reading from the Bible the account of Jesus stilling the waves on the Sea of Galilee. Then he drew his sword and traced a cross in the sky and drew a circle around the whole fleet, whereupon the waterspout passed by and they were saved. Utterly exhausted, Columbus was ready to give up searching for the strait and return to Spain, but none of the 4 ships could make the journey. They were so eaten away by shipworms and so full of holes that with every one working to bail out the water, they barely made it to Jamaica. There, Ferdinand said, we ran them ashore and built cabins on the decks where the people might lodge. Thus marooned on the island of Jamaica, the crew, 116 now out of the original 140, spent exactly 1 year, from June 1503 to June 1504. A large native village lay about half a mile away, and Columbus had to count on the natives for food while he figured out some way to get home. He had to borrow a boat, and in it one brave man, Diego Mendez, set out with 6 natives for Santo Domingo. Every month of anxiously waiting for their return made the men more irritable. The natives, sick and tired of feeding uninvited guests, brought in less and less food. A book Columbus had with him was one printed in Nuremberg, which listed eclipses of the moon for 30 years. Luckily, an eclipse was due in 3 days. On that day, the natives were summoned to a meeting. Columbus told them that God was angry with them, and he was now going to block out the moon. The eclipse occurred on schedule, and the food problem was solved. Late in June, a caravel arrived with brave Diego Mendez in command to take the survivors back to Santo Domingo, where most of them were glad to stay for a while. Another ship was chartered in September, and Columbus, his brother Bartholomew, his son Ferdinand, and 22 others embarked for Spain. On November 7th, 1504, the 4th and last voyage ended for the tired admiral of the ocean sea. Instead of being his crowning voyage, it had been the most useless. But, as Columbus wrote to his son Diego, he had done his best, and if what he had tried was beyond his knowledge and strength, our Lord in such cases asketh not more of men than good will. He signed his letter, Thy Father who loveth thee more than himself. Columbus was in Seville. The court was then at Medina del Campo. He got no summons from the sovereigns to appear. He could not know that while he waited to hear from her, his great and good friend, Queen Isabella, was dying.